Thank you so much for being here, Arthur Gottschalk. We are so excited to be speaking with you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to Tribeca New Music's performances in February.
So let's just get right into it. Tell us about yourself. Could you just give us a brief overview of your career, of your life, up until now?
Sure, and I'll emphasize the brief. So I have been composing since I was 12, but I didn't contemplate becoming a composer until after I started medical school and started taking for the first time composition lessons. And after a couple of years, I began to more easily imagine myself as a musician and a composer than as a doctor or a researcher. So I transferred to music, and I've never regretted it. I've never looked back. However, my parents decided that they would support me in every way except financially for making that decision. So I was immediately forced into the role of a guy paying for his own education. So I had to work, and I could work. I worked at a lot of different kinds of jobs, but the jobs I liked the most and that paid the best were music jobs. So I kind of got good at various aspects of music that had nothing to do with what they were selling us in the music composition department in Michigan. I was playing any kind of music that would have me play, everything from R&B, which I did a lot of R&B because I was a brass instrument player, and we were out, just outside Detroit. But also, I mean, I played polka bands or, lounge band, anything I could make some money. So I got very good at lots of different styles of music as a performer. And I started working in the studios, and through that, I got into arranging and so on and so on as a means to an end to pay through school. So when I finally graduated, and I accepted the job here at Rice University in Houston, Texas, which, by the way, is as far west of Hudson as I'd ever been in my life. Um, I got down here and I started doing what I thought I wanted to do, which was to teach music composition and direct the electronic music studios. But the pay was really crappy. And so the phone started ringing and people started asking me for studio work. So it was my side hustle, as you young people would have it these days. I was professor, which I wanted to be, but I had a side hustle working in the recording studios as a studio musician, but also as an arranger. And then I got into production. So a couple of years later, I'm with two partners. I'm running a large company that does record production and artist management and publishing, and we're working for major record labels and all kinds of things. And I had quite an interesting run in the music industry. And after going through a couple of wives and too much money, I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. That the only reason I did it was for the money, and I had the money, so I stopped and just devoted myself from then on more full time to just music composition. And that was right around the same time as the century turned. So it's been, almost 20 years now since I did that. I don't regret a moment of it. I know a lot about entrepreneurship and music business and law. I teach music business and law. I teach entrepreneurship in addition to composition and counterpoint and stuff. But it also had a huge reflection in my music because I've become a pan stylist, which means that not only does my palette incorporate all kinds of different melodic and rhythmic and harmonic vocabulary, but also I consider style to be just one more color available to me, like another harmony. And so my music over the past 20 years has begun to become very fluid in terms of its style. I was very influenced by one of the greatest of all American composers that no one ever heard of, Carl Stalling, who wrote the music for all those classic Warner Brothers cartoons. And his music would turn on a dime stylistically and instrumentally and in ensemble and every other kind of way. And I really like that fluidity. And so my music kind of takes from that. I try to express something, but I consider style to be just one of the many ways I have of expressing what it is I'm trying to say at the moment. So I find myself now towards the end of my life, still teaching, still enjoying what I'm doing, still composing, and very much looking forward to working with the musicians with Tribeca New Music.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I love that pan stylistic. I always I struggle to try to find because I my my friends call me genre fluid, which I guess is like similar. But I like that pan stylistic.
Yeah,
And the
I
way
didn't
you
want to say genre fluid, but that's the first thing that came to my mind.
yeah. So yeah, no, but I love that.
If
It's
I
just
say
another way of
genre
saying it.
fluid, then the next thing you're going to ask me what my pronouns are, and
Well,
then
yeah. I mean,
mess up.
no, thank you so much. You really described that so beautifully. So yeah, actually, let's jump right into the piece that you will be premiering, right? At
Yeah,
the Tribeca New Music Festival, "Loser." Could
yeah, it
you
turns out
please
there
tell
is
us
a premiere.
about that? Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Could you tell us about it?
sure. Well, it was a commission from Pittsburgh New Music Ensemble, and specifically for an outstanding American bass baritone named Timothy Jones, whom I've worked with before. And I got the commission right around the time of the 2019 elections, and I was looking at different libretti. I'm looking right at my library right now. Great speeches of African Americans, Obama speeches. I was looking at all these different kind of things, and then the insurrection happened on January 6th, and I had a crisis of faith, and I thought I am not going to be silent. I mean, I've never been silent politically anyway. I'm always getting in trouble because I speak up when I shouldn't, but I haven't really done it as much as I should have, perhaps artistically. And I thought I'm not gonna do this anymore. Um, all our colleagues in the literary and visual arts, as I mentioned, are taking stands in their work against the spread of fascism and racism in this country, and my colleagues in music, including myself, weren't doing anything. So I talked it over with Timothy Jones, and I said, "Look, this is going to sound strange, but I'd like to do an oratorio called Loser, based on, well, with the libretto as the provided by the inanities of Donald Trump." He was a little taken aback because Timothy Jones is not only an excellent bass baritone and a great musician, but he's also a very suave, sophisticated, and urbane young black singer. So the irony of having a person like this sing the words of that bigoted racist should not be lost on anyone. But he was game for it, and it took me 6 months to go through the repetitive inanities that man uttered during his 4 years in office. And luckily, I confined myself to just things he said when he was in office, because he's spent a lifetime just uttering stuff that even junior high kids wouldn't say in the schoolyard. But it took 6 months to boil it down into 5 acts, which, if I can recall, are misogyny, racism, his rather strange attraction to dictators, especially Putin, and then his mishandling of the virus crisis and the insurrection. And so that's how it came about. I wrote the piece. I was happy with what I did. Again, it's a very pan-stylistic work, because there are times when I had to quote cartoon music, because the things he says are so cartoony, and other things are so faux militaristic, and there are times that I'm quoting not only Deutschland über alles, but also even the Horst Wessel song, which was the marching song that the Nazis and the beer putsch marched to. So it's all in there, and then Jones has to, of course, learn the thing and memorize the thing and make it his own. Because it calls for a singer who also acts, and at no point is he supposed to imitate Trump or sing it in a funny manner or anything like that. He's a great singer, and he sings it great. The words speak for themselves. And one of the things we learn is that the followers of people like Trump will hear the words and not hear the words. They hear what they want to hear. When those words are sung, it forces you to truly hear them in a completely different way. So I was very happy about the results, and Jones became more happy about it, even though it's a rather difficult task for him to pull off, but he's the man for the job. So we go to Pittsburgh for the premiere this summer, and the executive director and artistic director were both a little concerned about the libretto. And I thought they must have some right-wing people on their board that they're worried about. And I said, don't worry about that. I haven't said anything bad about Trump. It's his words. If they like Trump, they should be happy to hear his words sung. It's no different than Copeland doing Lincoln Portrait. It's the words of an ex-president of the United States. The only derogatory thing there is the word loser. And that's there just because he hates more than anything else to be laughed at and called a loser. He says, no, well, it's not just them, but a lot of the people on the left are worried. They really don't want to hear, they're tired of hearing about that guy. And I said, well, how's that going for us? If we ignore it, is it going to go away? So anyway, begrudgingly, they scheduled it and we went on one rehearsal and I get a call. I mean, I'm in Pittsburgh, but I don't go to first rehearsals. We get a call. The clarinet player got COVID in the first rehearsal, so we're going to cancel. I said, oh, what can you do? It's COVID, right? It's the great excuse. You don't want to go to class, you got COVID, you tested positive for COVID, whatever, I know I've used it myself on occasion. So nothing really you can do once they pull out the great COVID thing, but they didn't reschedule it either. And I'm pretty sure that they didn't reschedule it because they had a sigh of relief, perhaps, that there was some COVID involved and that they couldn't go ahead with the premiere. So yeah, I thought the piece should be, what the first thing that hit me is how hard and long Timothy Jones worked at learning that piece. It's a virtuoso piece. And so I thought, if they're not going to reschedule it, then as far as I'm concerned, they no longer have the rights for first performance. So I let it out. I let it be known that anybody that had the guts could do the piece. And one of the first people that showed that had those guts was my good friend. You guys call him Preston, right? Yeah. Well, those of us that grew up with him, we call him Skip. Yeah, he's an old and cherished friend and a great musician and a great friend of modern music. So Skip says, we'll do it. I said, great, because I used to go to New York at least twice a year. And since COVID, I haven't been back at all. So if nothing else, the last time I was in New York was with Jones, actually, Timothy Jones. He did a piece for orchestra and soloist at Carnegie Hall with me 1 month before COVID hit. We had no idea that would be the last time we'd go to New York. So now we're coming back to New York and we're happy about it. So that's the background of Loser.
I love that. What a story. And I'm not in New York anymore, but I mean, everyone's so excited. New York is waiting for you, and it's going to be nice to go back, I can imagine. um that is you've made a lot of interesting points. Because one thing that I realized was, because when I first heard that this piece was being premiered, I didn't know anything about it, and Preston Skip said, we're doing a piece based on Donald Trump's, his words. And I was one of the people who said to myself, oh, why? Like, it's, why do we have to keep listening to it? But you're right. It does make, if you put it in song, it makes you listen to it in a different way, and it makes you hear it in a different way. And I think it's going to be eye-opening, because obviously I did not vote for Trump, but it's going to be eye-opening for me to hear it in that way. Because usually I just hear it as white noise, but it won't be. It'll be something different, which I'm quite excited to hear. And the other thing that you said that I found really interesting was you said that, all of the literary arts and the visual arts, they are all taking a stand against what's happening in our country. And you feel as though music is kind of, on the back foot of that. Could you expand on what you mean by that? And is it all music, or is it just within classical music? What are your thoughts on that?
It's pretty rare to hear anything and let's use classical music to mean art music, whether it's contemporary art music or whatever. But I think in popular music, you're going to hear a few more artists that are going to take a chance. Well, maybe it's a little easier for them because they have a more solid economic footing. What concerns me is that uh, one of the major differences between the composition of music and the composition of other forms of art is the necessity of a layer, the interpreter. So if I'm a painter and I want to paint Guernica, about the horrors of the Spanish Civil War, I just paint Guernica and let the chips fall where they may, and I don't have anybody to answer to except myself. But as a composer, you've got people that have got to play it. And it's not so much that we have to worry about their sensibilities, because most of us thinking people have pretty common ideas along these lines, but it's more like who ultimately pays for this. It's a much more expensive thing. So yeah, if it's an orchestra, for example, you have a board and you have grants, and people are sensitive because that grant money might come from a foundation that doesn't want to have any politics involved in it, or maybe the chairman of the board is some kind of silk stocking blue chip right-wing law firm, and it would be very upset. I mean, we have so many masters that we answer to, frankly, that's my excuse. I don't think it's just because my colleagues in music are afraid or uninterested or removed from the subject, but it's a little tougher. They think, well, the first thing they may be thinking is, well, what will people think? What will, not audiences, but more, what will the people who sponsor my music think? So many people in contemporary music in particular depend upon grants. And it's oftentimes the fact that the better a grant writer or composer is, the better a composer is, because he gets more performances, he gets more commissions, not because the music's better, but because they're much more prolific and they're much more adept at writing grants. Well, you don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg, and if they're worried that their source of revenue and notoriety is going to come from grants, and that might dry up if they get political, many of them will make the choice not. They don't need to be political. I mean, it's music, so whatever. So I understand that, and that might be a reason. It's and and I'm not saying it's a bad reason. Everybody has to figure out how they're going to pay the rent on their own, but it does make things a little more difficult in our field. Nonetheless, I still think, I'm a creature of the 60s and 70s, and boy, oh boy, were the contemporary composers back then coming out against the Vietnam War and segregation and all of the issues that were affecting us. We just don't see it as much today. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's an economic thing. Who am I? I'm just a composer. What do I know?
Well, no, you make some really interesting points because I think the one point that you made about the gatekeepers and just the level, the people that we have to go through as musicians to get the money, to get the performance opportunities. There's a level of pandering that, one has to do, and a level of, what's the word? A level of censorship that one has to kind of put themselves through so as to acquire the funds, like you said. So that I definitely agree with you that there's probably that, and then also it is different. Yeah, it could also be a generational thing, because there is another level of I don't want to say y'all weren't politically correct back then, but it was. I think there's like that level of it as well. But I do think that what you're saying is important. I do think that, especially in classical music, we should be making more political music, because if not, then we're going to be just playing the same things over and over again. And then what is new music? And then, it goes and it just tumbles into that. So,
Something else too, Alex, is that my feeling is that an artist has a responsibility to reflect their time and place through their art. And
absolutely.
these things that are happening are certainly a part of my time and place. And I can choose to ignore it, or I can choose to address it, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to ignore it, because It'd be like ignoring it. I'm a 20th century composer living in the 21st century now. Sorry, I'm old, but but I don't write 18th century music. It's inappropriate for a person writing in the 2020s to be writing 18th century music for so many reasons. Well, at the same time, if I'm going to write what is 2020 music? It should be of my place and time. And these are very, very important aspects of my place and time. And to not address them, I think, is not honoring my place in society as an artist.
Really well put, and thank you for putting it in that way, because I think that's something that the artists need to hear and to be reminded of. Who are you listening to right now? Like, who are your like favorite composers? I guess yeah. What is
That's a terrific question.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
because I ask my students all the time, because you if you're going to write music, you have to listen to music, you have to love music, you have to embrace it and stuff. And I tell you what, you know, there's a lot of people of my generation that it's easy for them to look at the younger generation, and go, they don't do things the right way, in my day, blah blah blah. But I am very much, when I was your age, and I looked at the people of my age, and I thought, boy, oh boy, I pity the world when it's going to be in our hands when we become the power. Because I just didn't see, I didn't. People were talking the talk, but they weren't walking the walk. But what I see in the people I'm teaching now, the people in their 30s and 20s now, is that they're very much walking the walk. They're doing interesting things. Yeah, it's different, but if it wasn't different, it'd be terrible. I mean, everyone should do their thing and go follow their own path and so on. I have nothing against that. I think it's wonderful. So I take great delight in what your generation of performers are doing first, before the composers. Composers are so busy trying to write a piece to bring them some modicum of fame or success or something. I don't know, but performers, and I started out as a performer, performers are playing music because they love music and they love this and that about music. So I'm much more interested to see what the young performers are doing. So what am I listening to? I'm listening to the Queen's cartoonists. Do you know who they are? You should. They're called the Queen's cartoonists because they live in Queens. And they call themselves the Queen's cartoonists because they all have this shared love of classic cartoon music that I was talking about earlier. Carl Stalling and Bill Lava and people like that is this crazy mixture of styles and orchestrations and sound effects that changes and spins and turns into time. It's manic energy and stuff that it's really, really the hardest stuff to play in the studio. Only the best musicians can handle it traditionally. And these guys in Queen's cartoonists, they're all multi-instrumentalists. They arrange their own music. It's hard to get a hold of those scores, so they arrange that music for themselves. They play concerts where they synchronize to classic cartoons, and they do other stuff. I mean, it's just all over the place. It's outstanding musical skill, and it's fun, and it's interesting. And it's another aspect of American culture that has remained unexplored that I think is a gold mine for people to take advantage of in an artistic sense. Another group that I became familiar with recently, and again, I'm an old guy, so I'm not in the same channels as you young people, so I don't always catch on as early. But a group I understand has been around for a while, but only last year they come to my attention. Scott Bradley's Postmodern Jukebox. You must know who those guys are. Yeah, I like them so much that I took my class here at Rice University. I took my class last November to House of Blues to see them, and they were blown away. They're all classical violinists and oboists and so on. And they're all studying to be a orchestra musician, but they had a great time. And one of the things that was great about it was they were seeing their peers who were also trained to be great orchestra musicians, having fun doing other stuff. What I liked about what Postmodern Jukebox does is they take today's music, but then they perform it in any of 10, 12 different styles of the past. Boogie woogie, big band swing, you name it. They do it in those different styles, and they make you really relook at. It's easy to look at the music of Taylor Swift or Lil Baby or Lil Nas X or some of these people say, well, it's not very musical. That's debatable, but it is. I don't care if something is musical or not. It just has to be interesting. And I don't find a lot of hip hop music interesting because it's very cultural and it's not my culture. So if I try to apply typical musical standards to it, maybe I'm not getting the point. With these people will put different musical trappings on it, and I can hear it with new ears and go, hey, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. And that's what I want, interesting. Another group that I just discovered, I was in Norway for 2 weeks in November, and people there kept talking to me about Norwegian jazz. And I said, yeah, I've heard plenty of Scandinavian jazz. Their idea of jazz is my idea of boring, but then they turned me on to a group. It's a group out of Belgium, but it has a lot of Norwegian jazz musicians in it. They're called Flat Earth Society. Have you heard these guys? Holy moly. I got their first, well, I don't know if it was their first album. The first album of theirs that I got was Cheer Me Perverts, I think it's called. And it's just, you hear it, and it's like, it's jazz, but it's contemporary music, but it is perfectly like this. To me, it sounds like jazz was an art form, and it developed until the 70s in this country. And then the corporate interests took it over, and we get Kenny G, we get lounge music, we get fusion, and it's not jazz anymore. But in Europe, they kept going, and I didn't know that. I'm just making this up because what I hear for these guys, Flat Earth Society, is they kept growing jazz into more and more artistic potentials. And I hear what they're doing, and I'm just blown away. And I'm so happy about the younger generation of performers and what they're finding right in our own backyard and in all the places that nobody else was looking. They're finding all this really great stuff. So that's what I'm interested in as a composer, is doing the same thing. They do it as performers. I do it as composers. I gave a lecture in China a couple of years ago. Everybody else lecturing was complaining about how they were once a colony and the victims of British oppression and the colonial system and everything. And I threw out the speech I was going to give, and I just said, hey, I'd like you guys to know that I too am from a country that was once under the yoke of imperial British oppression. We just got rid of those guys earlier. And but the bad thing for us is we don't have this huge wealth of folk song to fall back on to express ourselves like you guys do, because every one of us came from another country and another culture. But by the 21st century, we were this huge treasure of American popular music, like the Great American Songbook and jazz and rock and rhythm and blues. And why isn't that our music? Why are we still following European models when we have all that stuff that we could be making modern music from and reflecting our time and our era? So yeah, that's what I'm listening to. I'm listening to your generation make really cool music.
Heck yeah. That was I just have one more question for you and then we're all done. Is there anything that you want to promote? Is there anything you want to let us know about other than, your premiere coming up in New York?
Well, I've got, I don't like to, I don't have anything to promote. You can go to my website, and I don't know if it's I don't update my website, but I try to get somebody at the record company to do it. But whatever's there. I'm mostly right now. I got a number of performances coming up, but mostly I'm interested in what's coming up next week in New York. And I'd like to make a promotion, I guess, that not everybody can write a piece to take a stand, but anybody can come and see a piece that takes a stand. And so I would just like to encourage as many people to come out and share. You know, we need to come together, and music is a great way to come together. And I would like as many people as are interested in what's happening in this country to come on out, see what I've done, criticize it, comment, get the discussion going, talk to me. I'd love to meet them, musicians or not.
Incredible. Well, we're so excited to have you on the festival. We're so excited. I'm really excited to hear the piece, and I know that I know Skip Preston is very eager as well. So,
Yeah,
thank
something you
you.
might not know. It just occurred to me. A lot
Yeah.
of the people that have won the Young Composers Award through Tribeca have been students of mine.
Yeah, Jalen, is he a student of yours?
I just saw Jalen an hour ago.
Ah, that's
He's,
so funny.
he's eating pizza and playing Happy Birthday for another composer.
Incredible. I love it. Oh, college. That's yeah, I mean, yeah, the Young Composer competition for this year, just the last of the applications were in January, so I think I think it's being announced soon. So that we'll see. Maybe
We'll
this
see.
year as well.
I encourage my students to enter again, but I think last year Theo Chandler won, and he's also from here. If not last year, maybe the year before.
I think the year before. Yeah.
I get time, once COVID happened, something happens, it's a time
Yeah.
warp.
Oh, absolutely. I agree completely, actually. So anyway, thank you so much. Safe travels to New York. Thank you for your time. And we're so excited to see you.
A genuine pleasure. Thank you, Alex.